And thanks for your forbearance on all of this stuff, and especially for me being a jackass in the first 5 minutes and not looking at the microphone not working. Today is Memorial Day. And for those of you that do not know, or this might be your first time hanging out with me on SDHAM on a Memorial Day, this is a story that I tell every Memorial Day on purpose. And my grandfather, and it reminds us about what this day really is all about, at least from my perspective. I know that you may have your own personal stories and perspectives, but I always like to share this story on Memorial Day specifically. My grandfather was, when he was active in the military, he was, by the time his career was over, Army Air Corps. He was OSS, which was the predecessor to the CIA. He was Battle of Britain, battles in North Africa. He loved General Patton, was not a fan of General Eisenhower, knew Jimmy Doolittle of the Flying Tigers, and he would always tell stories of his time in those theaters. He was active in the wind tunnels at the Arnold Engineering Development Center in Tullahoma, Tennessee, in his 40s, when he wanted to give back to his country when they were in war in Korea. And it was, he wanted to be active in Vietnam, but they told him he was too old. At that time, he would have been in his 50s and late 50s at that point. So he was, in his tenure, the youngest ever to become bird colonel in the Army Air Corps. But because he really didn't mince words, pretty much told people what he thought, wasn't big in playing the political games inside the military, he would remain the youngest to ever become a bird colonel in the Army Air Corps because of all of that. And he would tell us stories about the Battle of Britain, where he was, one flight in particular, where he was coming in and he was going to be landing in at a British air base. And the Nazis would jam the frequencies of the Allies, and they would drift in and they would say, they would welcome. Literally what they would do is they knew who the flights were. They were going into Britain to land, and they would say, well, welcome, battalion, squadron, and they would name them. And they would name all the planes and, all the flights and everything. And they would always end their transmission with, and we will be seeing you soon. He would always tell that story. Then in North Africa, and this was in like Algeria, he and some other friends of his who were bird colonels at the time, they were there and they didn't have any transportation. And so Algeria being the port that it had, it was where the Allies in the United States, they would bring all the cargo ships and they would unload all the jeeps and all of the transportation that was needed for the forces there to battle in North Africa. And I mean, these are rows and rows and rows of jeeps, and they're just, as far as the eye could see. My grandfather and his fellow bird colonel, one day when they're going up and down these rows, and they didn't have any transportation. So my grandfather, raises his hand and he goes, "Hey, Private, there's my Jeep." Private, might be 18, probably more like 16. And he's there, he's fresh, he's freshly minted, and he's there in North Africa, and he's supposed to guard all of these Jeeps. And so when a bird colonel goes to you, a buck private that is just there to guard these Jeeps, you're not going to tell a bird colonel no. So the buck private's basically like, "Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yeah, yes, sir, yes, go ahead." And then his friend, who is the other bird colonel, was he'd sit there and go, "Hey, private, this one's my Jeep." And so he points at this Jeep. And so, of course, the private sitting go, "Yes, sir, yes, sir." And so they would take the two Jeeps, which they weren't theirs, but they kind of hornswoggled the buck private, and they would drive them around in Algeria. And then when they ran out of gas, they'd just abandon them because, well, they weren't theirs. Those are really the only stories he would tell. He would talk a little bit about the wind tunnels and what it was like there and how he wanted to continue to reenlist and reenlist and reenlist, but then they wouldn't let him. He wouldn't go into the stories that you would have liked to have heard just from remembering what war did in the 1940s. And we're talking 80 years ago now that we think about it. He wouldn't tell those stories. You'd ask him, well, hey, what about this, or this? And he'd be like, yeah, it's all right. He wouldn't go into detail. And it would be that stark reminder. And yes, we did lose those conversations because my grandfather didn't want to talk about them. As much as we wanted to record them to have them for posterity and pay them forward, he didn't want to talk about them, and understandably so. And I know that we see movies, and we'll see those movies that are today. They'll be on any kind of channel that you like on a day like today. Those movies will be up and running. They'll be up and running all day. And there are a few that are of the characterization and color that are about as close to those stories that my grandfather didn't want to tell. So we all have, from there going forward, we all have those parts of our family and our friends that have served and are still serving, or are those who are about to serve. And I can pretty much guarantee that it doesn't take a whole lot of steps to be connected to a family that has experienced loss serving our country. So what I would ask every day, reinforced today, is that you take a couple of seconds and remember what it takes to have what we have today. With all the things that are going on, all the things we talk about on a daily basis, where we are and what we have, just take a couple of seconds. And if it comes to mind to reach out to those people that are directly affected or are being affected by having folks serving in a far theater, just give them a thought today, give them a thought every day, but take today and maybe reach out a little more. And save a thought for those that have folks who have served and don't have those folks coming home. Because that is the ultimate sacrifice that has gotten us to where we are in this greatest experiment on this or any other planet when it comes to forming a nation. So just in addition to the meals and the time with friends and the time off and all of that, take a little time and think about those that are serving the ultimate sacrifice today and every day. Because without them, we wouldn't be able to have these conversations that we're having on a daily basis. We wouldn't be able to talk about the things we want to talk about. Remember those who've served. Remember those who are serving. And have a thought for those families who are about to have someone leave for the first time. Because that is a responsibility that I don't know if I could hang on to it. For me, it's hearing about the stories and remembering them so you don't forget them. But for those who are going to be experiencing it for the first time, those are steps down a path that very few of us by percentage ever get the knowledge to have going forward. So just think about those folks today. Think about them every day, but think about them a little more today here on Memorial Day, and remember what it's all about.